The giants. When the great spirits made the people, some of them became giants. They made themselves feared by attacking when most unexpected. After having endured the outrages of these giants for a great long time, the people banded together to destroy them. With the final force of about 800 warriors, they successfully annihilated the abhorrent giants. There were no giants anywhere after this, it was said. Did a race of giant humans once roam the biblical lands, Europe, and North America? When the whites arrived in the Ohio Valley and Midwest regions, thousands of burial mounds dotted the landscape. Today, most have been destroyed as a result of development, looting, and natural forces. Archaeologists have assigned mounds to various prehistoric cultures based on their shapes and artifacts they contain within. Scholars have debated the origin of these mounds. The Smithsonian Institution investigated them and conducted excavations in order to determine their origins. The mounds were apparently built by a series of prehistoric indigenous American cultures spanning thousands of years. Many were not built by the race of people we've come to know as the Amerindians, but by a race of prehistoric giant human beings. Both legend and archaeological evidence support this statement. Let's take a look. Falls under fair use as it's a parody. If you don't have a sense of humor, go. Welcome. Is this my reality? Is this your reality? Let's look at the legends. Native American legends report two distinct races of unusual people that pre-existed their culture. The first was a slender-bodied race with a long, narrow head. The other was a race with a massive bone structure and short heads. The first race, labeled by some as the Archaics, were living in the Ohio River Valley around 1000 BC. The second race, labeled the Adinas, well, they moved into the area from the south at a later date and then claimed control of the territory. A great war was fought, in which the Archaics, they were destroyed by the more advanced Adinas. It is believed that the Adina were related to the tribes of ancient Mexico. DNA testing has found no specific match between the Adina and any existing Native American group of the region, but it does show a relationship to the tribes of ancient Mexico. Let's talk about the mounds and who built these things. Now, there's burial mounds everywhere, giant ones. Many burial mounds have yielded remains of relatively giant human beings, as well as artifacts and randomly discovered remains. They have lent much support to the Native American legends. The Native Americans, they say they know nothing of the origins of these mounds, as per Scientific American. When an investigator asked an aged Native American in the 19th century what his people knew of these ancient graveyards. Now, this was a while back, and he asked this man, and the man answered, "We know nothing about them. They were here before the red man." It's believed that the practice of mound building was established by the Adinas. These mounds were the burial mounds in which the remains of many Native Americans have been discovered over the years. But what's unusual about these remains is that they support the Native American legends of giants, as the remains are frequently of people 8 to 12 feet tall. In addition to just the height, there are times other physical differences which would tend to point to the fact that they are not of the same race as the current peoples labeled Native Americans. Findings such as red hair, double rows of teeth, these are not found in known indigenous populations. Abraham Lincoln, also known as Honest Abe. Well, Abraham Lincoln, he toured many of the earthworks created by the mound building culture as a young congressman, and he learned of the giant race buried within many of them. In his famous speech at Niagara Falls, he quote said, "Then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara, as do ours now, contemporary with the whole race of men, and older than the first man." I don't know. Was he just making that up? We put together a timeline of documented giant discoveries in America. That these were all reported in newspapers and other publications. Now, a lot of this has been scrubbed, but if you look hard, you'll find it. But you got to ask yourself, why is it being scrubbed? Why is it being hidden? Now, we're going to show a lot of these articles in the background as we go through these events of timeline. They might not all match up, but it's very hard finding quality photographs and pictures from this time period since they don't want us to see it. Oh, here we go. In 1792, in Buffalo, New York, there were reports that 7- and 8-foot skeletons were found in an earthen fort in Orleans County with broad, flat-top skulls. Conneaut, Ohio, 1800. Among normal-sized skeletons found in the remains of the mounds were found gigantic bones. Some of the skulls and jaws were large enough to fit over the head and face of a normal man. 1821 in White County, Tennessee, an ancient fortification contained skeletons averaging at least 7 feet in length. In Bratton, Tennessee, footprints believed to be human were found in solid rock, 33 inches long and 1 foot wide. And get this, they have 6 toes each. 1829, during the construction of a hotel in Chesterville, workers digging up a mound discovered a large human skeleton. The local doctor came down and examined the skeleton. He said that the skull could have easily fit over a normal man's head. In addition, the skeleton had more teeth than the modern man. 1845, on the Wappatomica River, there have been found numerous Native American relics, among which was a highly finished pipe representing a snake coiled around the bowl. There was also discovered under the underjawbone of a human being of great size, and what is more remarkable, the teeth, they stood transversely in the jawbone, and it would pass over any man's face with entire ease. It was huge. Support this channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell before the Smithsonian comes and takes all our videos and throws them in the ocean with the giant skeletons. 1856, a decayed human skeleton claimed by eyewitnesses to measure around 3.28 meters, which is 10 foot 9 inches tall, was unearthed by laborers while plowing through a vineyard in November 1856 in East Wheeling, which is now West Virginia. 1872, Seneca Township, Noble County, Ohio. 3 skeletons, all that were at least 8 feet tall, with bone structure in proportion to their height. These skeletons also all had double rows of teeth. 1875, workmen were constructing a bridge near the mouth of the Paw Paw Creek. While digging through the heavy clay soil, they were astonished to uncover 3 giant skeletons, strands of reddish hair clinging to the skulls. A local doctor was called in to examine the remains. Dr. J. Ed DeHart, he found vertebrae larger than those of present type in the Wisconsin mounds in the year 1876. That was followed up in the year 1877 by W.H.R. Likens. He uncovered skull bones of a great size and thickness in the mounds of Kansas City. 1878, Ashtabula County, Ohio. Mounds were excavated on a land belonging to Peter Sweet. They yielded a skull and a jaw large enough that the skull would cover Sweet's head, and the jaw could easily be slipped over his face. Excavating further, they discovered these mounds contained the graves estimated between 2,000 and 3,000. Many of the other skeletons found were of gigantic proportions as well. In 1879, a 9 foot 8 inch skeleton was excavated from a mound near Brewersville, Indiana by George W. Hill, MD. A mica necklace still hung around the giant's neck. The bones, which were stored in a grain mill, were swept away in 1937 by a flood. That was reported in the Indianapolis News, November 10th. 1880, a skeleton which was reported to have been of enormous dimensions was found in a clay coffin with a sandstone slab containing hieroglyphics during mound explorations by Dr. Everhart. 1881, in digging in the cellar of a house, 9 human skeletons were found, and like such specimens from the other ancient mounds of the country, they showed that the mound builders were men of large stature. The skeletons were not found lying in such a manner it would indicate any arrangement of the bodies on the part of the entombers. In describing the tomb, Mr. Albert Harris said, It looked as if the bodies had been dumped into a ditch. Some of them were buried deeper than others, the lower one being about 7 foot below the surface. When the skeletons were found, Mr. Harris was 20 years of age, yet he states that he could carry one of the skulls over his head and let it rest upon his shoulders while wearing a fur cap at the same time. The large size of all the bones was remarked, and the teeth were described as double all the way around. 1883, 2 miles from the Mandan, on the bluffs near the junction of the Hart and Missouri rivers, says the local newspaper The Pioneer, is an old cemetery of fully 100 acres filled with the bones of a giant race. This vast city of the dead lies just east of Fort Lincoln Road. The ground has the appearance of having been filled with trenches piled full of dead bodies, both man and beast, and covered with several feet of earth. In many places there are mounds from 8 to 10 feet high, and some of them 100 feet or more in length. They've been thrown up and are filled with bones, broken pottery, vases of various bright-colored flint, and agates showing the work of the people skilled in the arts and that possessed a high state of civilization. This appears to have been a grand battlefield where thousands of giant men have fallen and died and been buried 5 miles above the Mandan. Was this the war between the two giant races? Was this where they all died? The opposite side of Missouri, there's another vast cemetery which hasn't even been explored yet. Now, once again, they asked an aged Native American what his people knew of these ancient graveyards. He answered again, "We know nothing about them. They were here before the Red Man." Scientific American documents that. 10 skeletons of both sexes and of gigantic size were taken from a mound at Warren, Minnesota in 1883. That was reported by the St. Paul Pioneer Press, May 23, 1883. In 1884, a skeleton 7 feet 6 inches long was found in a massive stone structure that was likened to a temple chamber within a mound in Kawaha County, West Virginia in 1884. Minnesota, eh? In 1888, discovered were the remains of 7 skeletons 7 to 8 feet tall. This was reported by the St. Paul Pioneer Press, June 29, 1888. Now, 7 skeletons, they were placed in a sitting position, were uncovered from a burial mound near Clearwater, Minnesota. The highly unusual skulls had double rows of teeth in both upper and lower jaws. It was also noted that the foreheads were sloping compared to normal human skulls. 1892, quote, "Where Proctorville now stands was one day part of a well-paved city, but I think the greatest part of it is now in the Ohio River. Only a few mounds there, one of which was near the C. Wilgus mansion and contained a skeleton of a very large person, all double teeth, and a jawbone that would go over the jaw with the flesh on it of a large man. The common burying ground was well filled with skeletons at a depth of about 6 feet. Part of the pavement was of boulder stone and part of well-preserved brick." This was reported by the Ironton Register. Another mound on the outskirts of Toledo, Ohio, yielded 20 skeletons. They were seated and facing east, and they had jaws and teeth, quote, "twice as large as those of present-day people. And each skeleton had a large bowl, and on it was curiously wrought with hieroglyphics." This was reported in 1895, and it was cited by Ron G. Dobbins' NEAR Journal in the fall of 1978. The skeleton of a large man was uncovered at Beckley Farm, Lake Coronis, Minnesota in 1896, while at Moose Island in Pine City, bones of other giants came to light. This was all reported by the St. Paul Globe, August 12, 1896. 1903, a new century, but same stories. At Fish Creek, Montana, a professor at Spar and his group of Princeton University students, you could actually take them seriously back then, they came across several burial mounds, and they unearthed the skeleton of a man about 9 feet tall. Next to him lay the bones of a woman who had been almost as tall. These reports are still happening in modern day. In 1965, a landowner was building a cattle stall when he found a perfectly preserved skeleton which measured 8 feet 9 inches in length when reassembled. He said the arms were extremely long and the hands were very large. but no weapons or other human implements were found around with the bones. The body was buried approximately 5 feet underground. The skeleton was assumed to be that of a large, deformed Native American. Now, White allegedly reburied the bones rather than taking them to a university for examination. I hate that always happens. But let's keep going. Quote, 3 skeletons were found at the mouth of the Pawpaw Creek. Some men were digging for a bridge foundation and found these bones at the lower end of the old Buffalo Wallow. It was Dr. Kidwell of Fairmount who examined them and said they were very old, perhaps thousands of years old. She said that when the skeletons were exposed to the weather for a few days, their bones turned black and began to crumble. All of these skeletons, she said, were measured and were found to be about 8 feet long or more. Did giants roam the world? Were there giants in America, in the Ohio River Valley, and elsewhere? We're going to take more look at the giants. We're going to look at the biblical aspects. We're going to look at other aspects of it. But right now we're talking about the Ohio River Valley giants. Was Abraham Lincoln just making things up to be dramatic? What are Native Americans? Did all these papers and researchers document and put it in print all the encounters as a clever ruse on the people? Or is there a cover-up underway to remove parts of our history that don't agree with the modern dogma? Did giants roam the Americas? What say you? Leave a comment. Let's get the fuck out of here before the giants come back and eat us.